Introduction. The Great Work of Conscious Ascension. Initiation is not the beginning of something new, but the recognition of what has always been. These words, echoed through the Hermetic tradition, and beautifully expressed in the teachings of Manly P. Hall, invite us to reconsider what it means to awaken. The path of ascension is not a conquest of the heavens, nor an escape from the world, but a return, a remembrance, of a divine truth buried within the soul itself. In this journey, we are not becoming something foreign. We are uncovering what we truly are. Manly P. Hall devoted his life to unveiling the hidden teachings of ancient traditions. He did not invent a new system, but illuminated the patterns that run through Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, Kabbalah, alchemy, theosophy, and the sacred sciences of Egypt, Greece, and the East. He reminded us that all true initiates speak of a ladder, a symbolic staircase, ascending from the lowest material vibration to the highest spiritual light. The soul, born into the shadows of the physical world, carries within it the potential to rise, and through conscious effort, it may reclaim its luminous origin. This book is about that ascent. It is a journey through the planes of existence, as understood in Hermetic cosmology. These are not mere concepts or external realms. They are states of consciousness, each one vibrating at a different frequency, each one nested within the other like concentric circles. The physical, the mental, and the spiritual are not separate worlds. They are different expressions of the same divine mind. To the untrained eye, the world appears fractured, chaotic, and material. But to the initiate, reality is layered with purpose. What seems like coincidence is causality. What appears mundane is symbolic. And what we call ordinary is often sacred in disguise. Manly P. Hall emphasized that true vision begins when we learn to interpret life not just through facts, but through meaning. When the symbols of the ancient temples are recognized in the patterns of our daily existence. As Hall taught, the purpose of Hermetic philosophy is to give the student the tools for self-transmutation. The same way an alchemist seeks to turn base metals into gold, the initiate learns to transmute ignorance into wisdom, fear into love, base desire into divine will. The true philosopher's stone is not a mineral. It is a state of being, a perfected consciousness aligned with the divine rhythm of the cosmos. We will explore these transformations through 8 chapters, each rooted in a Hermetic principle drawn from Hall's writings. These chapters are not mere philosophical musings. They are maps for inner work. Each one describes a plane, a level of vibration, and the methods by which we may pass through it. From the density of matter to the subtlety of spirit, we will follow the soul's spiral upward, gathering the sacred keys along the way. You do not need to believe in any doctrine to begin. Hermeticism, at its heart, is not a religion, but a science of consciousness. Its truths are not imposed. They are discovered, experienced, confirmed in the stillness of one's own being. Whether you are new to this work or have walked the path for lifetimes, the invitation is the same: to rise inwardly, to awaken the hidden flame, and to walk with conscious awareness through the sacred layers of existence. As you listen, you may notice certain terms repeating: vibration, polarity, mind, initiation. These are not metaphors. They are laws. And when applied, they unlock the gates of perception. They reveal that everything, every trial, every joy, every fleeting moment, holds within it the seed of ascent. The soul is not static. It moves, stretches, contracts, ascends. And in this motion, the planes of awakening unfold like petals of an unseen lotus. The teachings of Hall remind us that the universe is a living book, and the student of the mysteries must learn to read it, not with the eyes, but with the heart and the purified mind. Every moment of resistance, every inner conflict, every forgotten dream is a page in this book. There are no meaningless experiences, Each one is a cipher, a riddle waiting to be solved. And as we begin to solve these riddles, we do not merely grow, we remember. We begin at the bottom, as all initiates do. Not because we are unworthy, but because the lower must be understood and redeemed before the higher may be sustained. Hall wrote that true progress is measured not by mystical visions or temporary ecstasies, but by the strength of character, the clarity of thought, and the compassion of action. The Hermetic student is not an escapist. They are a bridge builder between worlds, bringing spirit into form and form into spirit. To walk the Hermetic path is to become conscious in a world that often rewards unconsciousness. It is to choose presence over reaction, wisdom over noise, truth over comfort. And it is not always easy, but it is sacred. This is the great work. Not the rejection of matter, but its transmutation. Not the denial of desire, but its purification. Not the abandonment of the world, but its sanctification. Through presence, intention, and understanding. As you listen to this journey, may you remember what you already know. And may each layer of awakening bring you closer to the divine pattern that breathes through all things, including you. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Not for numbers, not for validation, but to help increase the consciousness of this planet by getting this message to reach more people. Every interaction expands the light, and every awakened soul becomes a beacon for those still seeking. Let us now begin. Chapter 1. The Principle of Mentalism and the Descent into Matter. All things that exist emerge from the one mind, the foundation of Hermeticism. This is the first and most essential principle in the Hermetic Teachings. It is the cornerstone upon which all other laws are built. It tells us that the universe is mental, that behind everything, behind matter, behind form, behind the stars and bodies and thoughts, there is mind, infinite, eternal, self-existent. The Hermetists called it the All, not a being, but being itself. In the writings of Manly P. Hall, the one mind is the silent architect of the cosmos, an invisible intelligence, whose thoughts become galaxies, whose breath becomes worlds. To understand this principle is to understand the true origin of the self. We are not separate observers of reality. We are expressions of the very mind that dreamed it into being. And yet here we are, embodied, limited, encased in flesh, bound to a world of friction and form. Why would consciousness, born of the infinite, descend into the finite? Why would a divine spark bury itself in the shadows of the material world? The answer, according to Hermetic wisdom, lies in the nature of experience and evolution. Manly P. Hall taught that the descent into matter is not a punishment, but a phase in a greater cycle, a necessary immersion. Consciousness descends not to forget itself forever, but to remember itself through contrast. Just as light is understood only in relation to darkness, the divine within us awakens by encountering its opposite. The soul descends so that it may rise again, with awareness, with wisdom forged in the fire of limitation. This is the first stage of the planes of awakening, the dense material plane. It is here that the one mind has crystallized itself into the illusion of separation. What was once unified now appears fragmented. In truth, nothing has been lost. But to the eye of the soul bound in matter, unity becomes difficult to perceive. The body becomes the first temple, and the senses the first initiators. Every sensation, hunger, touch, loss, ecstasy, becomes a glyph. Each experience invites the soul to either react unconsciously or to respond with presence. This is the alchemy of the physical plane. to recognize that even the most mundane aspects of life are expressions of the divine mind, slowed into form. Hall often reminded us that materialism, the belief that only what can be touched is real, is one of the great illusions. He wrote that matter is simply spirit at its slowest rate of vibration. The stone, the tree, the body. All of these are thoughts, condensed. Their form does not contradict spirit. It reveals it, once seen through the inner eye. The principle of mentalism reveals that nothing exists independently. Each object, each person, each event is an effect of a cause, and the ultimate cause is always thought. Thought is not secondary to the world. It is the blueprint, the substance, the hidden fire beneath appearances. In your own life, every reality you move through, whether joy or hardship, stagnation or growth, is a mirror of thought, both individual and collective. This is not to say you are to blame for every difficulty, but rather that you are not powerless. For just as thought created the world, thought can recreate it. You are not only a recipient of reality, you are a participant in its construction. But here is the paradox. While you are made of divine mind, you are also walking through the fog of forgetfulness. The descent into matter means stepping into a realm of limited perception. It means that you must remember the light, while walking in darkness. This is not a flaw. It is part of the sacred pattern. In alchemical terms, this descent is known as nigredo, the blackening. It is the first stage of transformation, where the soul is immersed in density, confusion, even despair. But from this darkness comes the possibility of awakening. It is in the blackness of coal that the diamond is formed. It is in the depths of matter that the hidden spark begins to stir. And that stirring is what calls us forward, into the higher planes. You may ask, if all is mind, then how do I ascend from this dense reality? The Hermetic answer is simple. By raising your vibration, by purifying your thought, and by aligning your consciousness with the source of consciousness itself. Hall reminds us that the initiate does not curse matter. Nor does he run from it. He learns from it. He reads it. He extracts the lessons hidden in the weight of flesh and time. He sees the divine mind not only in the stars, but in the stone beneath his feet. To begin the ascent through the planes of awakening, you must first acknowledge where you are. You are not lost. You are exactly where the soul must be to begin its great work. This material world is not a prison, but a crucible. The pains, the limitations, the seeming slowness of life. These are the tools of refinement. The principle of mentalism teaches us that change begins in consciousness. If you are to rise to the higher planes, you must first reclaim your mind. You must become its master, not its slave. You must learn to observe your thoughts, to purify them, to plant them with intention, as a gardener tends to a sacred field. As above, so below. As within, so without. These Hermetic axioms are not slogans. They are operational truths. They remind you that the reality around you is inseparable from the reality within. To lift the world, you must first lift your thought. And so, the first key is given. You are mind. The world is mind. Everything you experience is born from the one mind. And your task, here now, is to remember this truth. Through practice, presence, and perception. This is the first gate on the path of awakening. Let us pass through it with awareness. Chapter 2. The Law of Vibration and the Density of the Physical Plane. Spirit is not different from matter, but matter is spirit, at its lowest vibratory rate. This Hermetic principle, as echoed by Manly P. Hall, invites us to dissolve the false barrier between the seen and the unseen. It teaches that the universe is not made of separate substances, but of one essence, in various degrees of vibration. What we call physical is not the absence of spirit. It is spirit, vibrating slowly, taking on form and density. Vibration is the hidden architecture of the universe. Everything moves. Nothing rests. From the subatomic to the celestial, from thought to stone, all is in motion. Hall reminds us that this is not metaphorical, it is literal. What differentiates the visible from the invisible, the higher plane from the lower, is not substance, but frequency. In the lower realms of consciousness, vibration is slow, thick, resistant. That is why life in the physical world often feels heavy. Progress seems delayed. Emotions linger. Growth is bound to cycles of time, decay, and renewal. But none of this means that the physical plane is unspiritual. On the contrary, this is where the great work begins. The physical body, often neglected in modern spiritual teachings, is not an obstacle, but a symbol. It is the sacred temple through which consciousness first becomes aware of contrast, limitation, and transformation. As Hall wrote, the body is not to be despised, for it is the chalice of experience, the container of lessons too deep for the intellect alone. Pain, struggle, and resistance are not punishments. They are vibrational signals. Invitations to alchemy. They show us where energy is stuck, where perception is closed, where growth is possible. To walk the Hermetic path is not to avoid discomfort, but to enter it consciously, to listen to it, and to raise its tone through awareness. This is why the law of vibration is central to the planes of awakening. It is the law that makes movement between planes possible. No soul can ascend by bypassing vibration. Instead, the initiate learns to work with it, to elevate it gradually, harmoniously, without force. The denser energies of the lower planes are not cast off, they are transmuted. Transmutation does not happen in theory. It happens through right action, through sacred intention, through the day-to-day choices we make, with our bodies, emotions, and minds. What we eat, how we move, the tone of our voice, the honesty of our labor. All of these shape our vibration. Each act is either a descent into inertia, or a step toward refinement. Manly P. Hall emphasized the importance of sacred labor. He often wrote of the invisible service that elevates even mundane tasks into rituals of transformation. A meal cooked with love, a garden tended with mindfulness, a conversation held with presence, these are not trivial moments. They are alchemical flames, igniting the dense into the luminous. The physical world is not a distraction from spirituality. It is the ground of it. The Hermetic student learns to see the world, not as a trap, but as a text, a living manuscript, written in the language of vibration. Every tree, every stone, every illness, every ache, every act of touch, is encoded with energetic information. To awaken is to begin to read this language. The body, too, becomes an oracle. Through posture, breath, sensation, and rhythm, it reveals where energy flows and where it is bound. Hall taught that the initiate should become intimate with their own vehicle, not to dominate it, but to understand it. For only by knowing the density can one learn to raise its tone. Nature is one of the greatest allies in this work. The natural world vibrates in rhythms that align with higher laws. The rustling of leaves, the flow of water, the pulse of animal life, all of these reflect unbroken connection to the source. To sit with a tree, to walk without aim, to breathe with the wind, these are not escapes from the path. They are the path, if walked with consciousness. Even more, the rhythm of the earth has the power to recalibrate us. Modern life, saturated with artificial frequencies, often pulls our vibration downward. But barefoot contact with soil, immersion in ocean tides, or quiet observation of a sunrise realigns us with the original pulse of creation. This is not sentimentality. It is science of the soul. The ancients aligned temples with solar and lunar rhythms for a reason. They understood that vibration could be harnessed, concentrated, and directed. Not just in stone structures, but in the body temple of the initiate. Sacred architecture mimics the structure of subtle energy. And so does sacred embodiment. Vibration responds to attention. What you place your awareness upon grows in frequency. What you avoid or suppress stagnates. Hall was clear: the key to spiritual growth is not denial but refinement. The initiate does not fight the body, they uplift it. They do not reject desire. They purify it. They do not run from struggle, they give it meaning through presence. This is why awakening does not begin in meditation alone. It begins in how we eat, how we move, how we rise in the morning, how we speak to others, how we speak to ourselves. Every act, no matter how simple, is a tuning fork, adjusting the frequency of the soul. To rise through the planes is to increase the subtlety and coherence of one's vibration. Not through force or superiority, but through consistency and intention. The higher planes are not distant heavens, they are already within you, vibrating quietly beneath the noise of ordinary life. When you bring the body, mind, and spirit into resonance, you begin to hear that vibration more clearly. And so, this chapter is not about escaping the physical. It is about embracing it as the gateway to all higher awareness. The denseness of the world is not a punishment. It is an invitation. It is the first veil. And by raising your vibration, not in bursts, but in stable, daily rhythm, you begin to lift that veil, one breath, one step, one choice at a time. The law of vibration reminds you that everything can be changed, not through fantasy, but through frequency. If you seek transformation, do not wait for spirit to arrive. Begin by honoring the matter already before you. Begin by walking with presence, by laboring with love, by tuning your life into a vessel worthy of the light. This is the second gate on the path of awakening. Let us step through it with strength and humility. Chapter 3. The mirror of the mind, mental alchemy, and the second plane. The mind is the bridge between the visible and the invisible. These words, echoing through the teachings of Manly P. Hall, point us toward the invisible territory, where the soul first begins to rise beyond form. If the physical plane is the realm of structure and density, the mental plane is the realm of subtle movement, the space where thought shapes reality, where image becomes influence, and where inner energy begins to direct outer experience. The ancients knew that the mind is not merely thought, it is a medium, a mirror, a tool, and a test. It is the gateway between what has form and what does not. In the planes of awakening, the mental plane is the first true doorway into conscious power. To ascend here is not about escape, it is about refinement. And that refinement begins with understanding the nature of the mind itself. Manly P. Hall often wrote that the mind is not your enemy, but it is not yet your ally either, not until it is trained. Left unchecked, it reflects every flicker of fear, every inherited belief, every chaotic impulse floating through the astral field. But once mastered, the mind becomes a wand, a sacred implement, through which the magician directs will, healing, and manifestation. This is the art of mental alchemy. Thought is a substance. It is not invisible in the truest sense, it simply vibrates more subtly than matter. The moment you think, you emit. The moment you feel, you shape the field around you. The initiate on the mental plane must begin to treat thought as creative force, as real as any stone or flame. Hall warned of the dangers of projection and illusion. The untrained mind casts its desires and fears onto others, misreads signs, invents dramas, and chases shadows. Fantasy becomes confusion. Memory becomes distortion. Even spiritual ideals can become traps, when believed without discernment. The initiate learns that truth is never what the unrefined mind assumes. It must be tested, held to the flame of stillness and presence. The first task, then, is observation. To observe the mind, without reacting to it. To see a thought arise, move, and pass, like a cloud, not a command. This is not repression. It is awareness. It is the reclaiming of inner space. And it is through this space that the work of transmutation begins. To transmute is to lift. A base thought, born of fear, judgment, or desire, is not destroyed, but transformed. It is raised into something finer, something more aligned. A selfish thought becomes an opportunity to serve. A fearful thought becomes a signal to ground. An anxious thought becomes a doorway to breath, to presence. This is alchemy on the mental plane, not the suppression of thought, but its elevation. Manly P. Hall described the true magician as one who can generate thought with precision and purpose, and more importantly, hold it. Not just for moments, but with duration, clarity, and will. He taught that the mind, once purified, becomes a vessel for archetypes, eternal patterns, divine ideas, that wish to descend into the world of form. The magician receives, refines, and reflects these patterns into their life, speech, and work. But to reach this level, the initiate must pass through a kind of mental fire, the friction of contradiction, the collapsing of false beliefs, the humbling of the ego's need to know. Many stop here. They mistake imagination for intuition. They mistake knowledge for wisdom. But the Hermetic path demands more. It demands mental purity, which is not about what you think, but how you think, the rhythm, clarity, and origin of your thought. The mind, when mastered, becomes not a screen of distraction but a clear mirror, reflecting both the higher and the lower without distortion. It becomes a bridge, stable, direct, and sacred. Between spirit and matter. Between ideal and expression. In your own experience, the mental plane reveals itself in every choice of attention. What you focus on expands. What you resist amplifies. What you repeat becomes a current. Thought, over time, becomes thought form, an energetic structure that lives in your field, shaping your relationships, habits, and outcomes. Therefore, to work on this plane is to take radical responsibility. Not to blame yourself for every passing emotion, but to recognize that you are a transmitter and receiver, and that your internal signal affects more than you can see. Every time you return to presence, you reclaim the mind from noise. Every time you think with clarity, you build a step on the invisible staircase of awakening. Mental alchemy also involves the power of symbol. Symbols are more than images. They are containers of force, doorways that bypass the rational and imprint directly on the soul. Hall emphasized the importance of studying sacred geometry, ancient glyphs, planetary sigils, and mythological patterns, not to collect trivia, but to commune with the deeper currents of meaning that move beneath language. You may not always have the words, but you will have the symbol. A circle, a flame, a serpent, a star. These live inside the mental plane as living archetypes, ancient echoes of truth, waiting to be seen, remembered, and worked with. It is here, in the realm of the mind, that many seekers first taste the power of manifestation. But the wise do not rush to create. First, they cleanse the chamber. They make the mental temple suitable for higher impressions. And only then, through silence, clarity, and intention, do they begin to direct thought as a magical act. And so, the mental plane is both a challenge and a gift. It is the place where awakening becomes choice, where awareness becomes architecture, where the invisible begins to move the visible. The initiate must step carefully here, not with fear, but with reverence. For the mind can bind or liberate, depending on how it is used. This is the third gate on the path of awakening. Let us pass through it with discipline, awareness, and the courage to refine our inner world. Chapter 4. Polarity and the Alchemy of Opposites. Every truth is half true, and every polarity is a pathway to unity. This Hermetic axiom, often quoted by Manly P. Hall, points to a core principle in the journey of spiritual ascent, the law of polarity. Everything in creation appears to exist in opposites: light and darkness, masculine and feminine, birth and death, expansion and contraction. Yet behind these pairs lies a single reality, moving in rhythm. The initiate learns that duality is not a flaw in the universe. It is a veil, a dynamic mask worn by unity. And to awaken, one must learn not to pick sides, but to see through the dance of opposites, and ultimately, to reconcile them. Polarity governs every plane of existence, but it becomes especially relevant in the work of inner alchemy. Here, the opposites are not merely external, they are alive within you. Thought and emotion, reason and intuition, action and stillness. These polar forces are not enemies. They are the ingredients of the great work. Manly P. Hall taught that each person carries within them the solar and lunar mysteries, the masculine and feminine currents of consciousness. The sun represents clarity, structure, logic, and will. The moon represents intuition, receptivity, emotion, and reflection. These are not limited to gender. They are energetic poles, flowing through all beings and all things. In the unawakened state, these energies are often at odds. One dominates the other. The sun burns too hot and dries the soil of feeling. The moon floods too deeply and drowns clarity in emotion. But in the Hermetic path, the goal is not to repress one or exalt the other. The goal is sacred balance. Not in theory, but in lived experience. This is what the ancients called the hieros gamos, the sacred inner marriage. The reconciliation of opposites within the self. When the solar and lunar aspects are brought into harmony, a third force is born. Not compromise, but synthesis. This is the hidden child of alchemy, the awakened consciousness that transcends the battlefield of duality. To reach this inner harmony, the initiate must learn the art of holding paradox. The mind seeks certainty. It wants to label, divide, choose. But the soul thrives in mystery. It knows that joy and sorrow can coexist. That strength may appear as softness. That stillness may carry the greatest force. To hold paradox is to allow two truths to exist without canceling one another. Hall often warned that fanaticism is the failure to see the other side of truth. Whenever we cling too tightly to one pole, to light without shadow, or reason without feeling, we distort reality. We become spiritually lopsided. True wisdom, he taught, arises when we learn to move between poles, recognizing both as necessary, both as reflections of the one. On the path of polarity, the initiate moves from opposition to integration. This journey is not passive. It requires conscious attention, honest reflection, and daily practice. It often begins with discomfort, the realization that inner conflict is not a sign of failure, but a sign of readiness. Something is trying to merge, to evolve. And your task is to allow that process without resisting it. You may notice, for example, a tendency to split yourself into roles: the rational self versus the emotional self, the spiritual self versus the worldly self. These are fragments of consciousness, calling to be heard, respected, and brought into dialogue. Not argued with, but witnessed. When opposites are witnessed without judgment, they soften. They begin to reveal their hidden complementarity. This work is the essence of inner alchemy. In Hermetic symbolism, the sun and moon often appear on opposite sides of a sacred figure, a god, a magician, or a temple pillar. This image is not decorative. It encodes the principle of polarity at the heart of transformation. You are that figure. You are the temple. And within you, the two lights must meet, not in conflict, but in collaboration. This merging of opposites is not abstract. It lives in your breath, your body, your attention. The inhale and the exhale. The giving and the receiving. The active and the yielding. These are all reflections of the Hermetic law of polarity, playing out in every moment. To work consciously with polarity, begin by observing it in your life. Where do you resist one pole and favor the other? Do you feel safer in control than in surrender? Do you overvalue intellect at the expense of intuition? Do you pursue light while fearing darkness? These imbalances are not faults. They are invitations, entry points into deeper wholeness. As Hall taught, the initiate does not destroy the lower to reach the higher. They transmute it. They elevate it. The masculine becomes nobility, focus, presence. The feminine becomes receptivity, depth, and creative flow. And when they are united, something radiant emerges, a stillness that acts, an intuition that sees clearly, a strength that yields when needed. This is the foundation of Hermetic integration, to become a vessel in which polarities unite, and give rise to higher awareness. And this awareness is not fragile. It is resilient. It does not shatter under contradiction, because it no longer fears contradiction. It has seen that opposites are not meant to fight. They are meant to dance. In practical terms, you may begin this alchemical dance through small rituals of balance. For every period of intense work, take a period of deep rest. For every act of assertion, practice surrender. If you speak often, practice silence. If you analyze constantly, spend time in nature without needing to interpret. Let the energies you resist become teachers. Let contradiction become your crucible. As you learn to move between poles, you become more fluid, more whole. Your energy becomes stable yet alive. You stop needing life to be one thing or the other, and begin to experience a kind of peace that holds complexity. This is not numbness. It is depth. The soul deepens when it no longer flees from paradox. And from this depth arises a new vibration, one that resonates across all the planes. Because when polarity is integrated on the mental and emotional level, it begins to shift the physical. It begins to open the doors to the higher spiritual planes, where unity is not an idea but a living presence. But that unity is not found by rejecting duality. It is found by moving through it, with eyes open and heart steady. This is the fourth gate on the path of awakening. Let us walk through it not by choosing sides, but by standing at the center, where all things reconcile, and the hidden light of the One begins to shine. Chapter 5. The Astral Light and the Invisible World. The astral body is the subtle garment of the soul, the bridge to higher dimensions. Manly P. Hall described the astral body not as a fantasy or abstraction, but as a real and dynamic vehicle, the luminous counterpart of our physical form. It is woven from finer matter, vibrating faster than the dense physical, yet still part of the world of form. It is through this body that we dream, imagine, and travel inwardly. It is the cloak we wear when we cross the threshold into the invisible world. The astral plane, which lies between the physical and spiritual planes, is where symbols become realities, and where the unconscious mind expresses itself in living patterns. It is the world of reflection, the twilight realm, where the seen and unseen blend. Hall called it the land of mirrors, where thought takes shape and emotion becomes substance. It is here that the initiate begins to encounter the inner condition made visible. In the waking world, it is possible to hide. Masks are worn. Emotions are repressed. Truth is obscured. But in the astral world, nothing can be hidden for long. The frequency of the astral reflects your vibration back to you, often in strange and symbolic forms. Desires, fears, unresolved conflicts. These all appear in the astral, like actors on a dream stage. This is why dreams matter. They are not random mental noise. They are astral experiences, albeit filtered through memory and metaphor. Hall wrote that dreams are fragments of higher worlds, seen dimly through the veil of personality. In dreams, you may encounter people, landscapes, and beings that feel more real than waking life. This is not imagination. This is exposure to the astral realm. But not all of what is encountered here is benevolent or wise. The lower astral, in particular, is a realm of emotional residue, populated by illusions, projections, and entities that feed on unconscious energy. Fear, lust, envy, and obsession are thick currents here. And without discernment, the seeker can become entangled in glamour, mistaking emotional intensity for spiritual truth. Hall warned that many so-called visions are not visions at all. They are refractions of unresolved inner content, dressed in symbolic form. He taught that the astral light, the luminous substance that fills this realm, is both a revealer and a deceiver. It reveals what is within, but only to those prepared to see it without distortion. That is why the first tool of astral navigation is inner stillness. Without stillness, the waters of the astral are stirred by every thought and feeling, becoming cloudy and misleading. The initiate learns to still the emotions, to anchor the mind, and to observe without identification. This calm gaze allows the symbols of the astral to organize into meaning. The second tool is purity, not moralism, but vibrational integrity. The more coherent and aligned your energy becomes, the clearer your astral experiences. Purity, in this context, means truthfulness, presence, and refinement of motive. When your actions, thoughts, and emotions align, the astral mirror becomes less distorted. The third tool is imagination, not fantasy, but creative perception. The astral world is shaped by thought and emotion, which means the mind must become a sculptor. Hall emphasized the sacred role of the trained imagination in spiritual ascent. Visualization, symbolic ritual, and focused contemplation all generate movement in the astral body. And that movement can become a ladder, lifting the soul to subtler planes. Symbols live and breathe in this realm. The archetypes, the inner forms behind all myths and spiritual truths, reside in the upper astral. The wise use these archetypes not for escape, but for grounding deeper awareness. The hero, the priestess, the serpent, the tree, the star. These are not inventions. They are energetic currents with intelligence. They are doorways. But to enter those higher zones of the astral, one must pass through the lower layers, which test the clarity of intention. Hall taught that the early stages of astral exploration are often like wandering through a hall of smoke and mirrors. The sincere student must be willing to pause, reflect, and ask, is this truth or is this projection? You may experience intense dream visions, astral encounters, or moments of sudden knowing. But the test is never the experience itself, the test is whether it leads you into greater presence, balance, and insight. The astral plane offers power, but also temptation, the temptation to dwell in illusion, to chase symbols without grounding, to confuse emotional highs with spiritual realization. The initiate is warned not to become a collector of visions. Hall wrote, "The true occultist does not seek experiences, but understanding. Each astral experience must be brought back to the physical and integrated into life. Otherwise, it becomes noise, a spiral without ascent. This is why the astral body must be trained. Not to dominate it, but to refine it into a reliable vehicle. Breathwork, visualization, sound, dream journaling, sacred movement, these practices help tune the astral body, aligning it with your higher self, rather than your reactive self. It is through the astral body that the initiate begins to experience conscious journeying. A step beyond the dream, into deliberate movement between inner realms. These journeys may occur during deep meditation, lucid dreaming, or moments of altered awareness. But they are not escapes. They are initiations, and they must be undertaken with humility. Even the subtle realms are subject to law. The Hermetic laws of vibration, correspondence, and polarity do not stop at the physical. They continue through the astral and into the spiritual. As above, so below. What is unbalanced in you will draw its match in the astral. What is unresolved in you will color what you see. The initiate's safety lies not in control, but in clarity and consistency of inner alignment. Hall often described the astral light as the memory of the world. It stores the emotional and mental residue of every human action and thought. This means the astral world is not just personal. It is collective. When you move through it, you are passing through the emotional history of the species. Your dreams are not yours alone. They carry echoes. To walk this world with integrity, the initiate must develop discernment, the ability to tell the difference between signal and noise, essence and form. Not all that glows is gold. Not all that speaks is wise. But through steady presence and purified intention, the seeker begins to recognize the true current beneath the surface, the current that leads upward. And in time, the astral body itself becomes luminous. It begins to reflect not just the chaos of the lower mind, but the clarity of the soul. And when this happens, the bridge is ready. Not to escape the world, but to bring the light of the higher into the structures of the lower. The astral becomes not a place to flee to, but a channel through which truth flows. This is the fifth gate on the path of awakening. Let us pass through it not in haste, but with quiet steps, clear hearts, and open minds. Ready to receive what the visible world cannot always reveal. Chapter 6. The Temple of Initiation and the Subtle Bodies. The true temple is built within. The body becomes the altar of transformation. This principle, repeated in the writings and lectures of Manly P. Hall, reframes everything we think we know about spirituality. The quest is not outward. The temple is not stone. It is not a shrine hidden in the mountains, or buried beneath ancient sands. The temple is within you, and it has always been there, waiting for you to step inside consciously. The human being is a microcosm of the universe, a reflection of divine architecture, encoded in flesh, thought, and spirit. Every sacred structure built in stone, the pyramid, the cathedral, the ziggurat, is a symbolic representation of the inner anatomy of the soul. These buildings mirror the stages of initiation the seeker must pass through inside themselves. Manly P. Hall taught that all ancient temples were constructed with profound knowledge of esoteric anatomy. They were not simply places of worship, they were initiation chambers, aligned with celestial forces and internal geometries. Each room, each column, each sacred ratio mirrored aspects of the subtle body, the nervous system, the energy channels, the chakras, the pineal gland, and the layers of the aura. To understand the temple within, we must first understand the layers of the self. The Hermetic tradition teaches that the human being is not a single body, but a series of bodies, each vibrating at a different frequency. The physical body is the outermost layer, dense, visible, and governed by the laws of time and space. It is the anchor of incarnation and the vehicle of earthly experience. The astral body, as we explored in the previous chapter, is the subtle emotional and energetic sheath. It registers feeling, mood, dreams, and magnetic resonance. It is the body of sensation and symbolic experience. The mental body vibrates even more subtly. It is the domain of thought, belief, perception, and memory. It shapes how we interpret both inner and outer reality. Beyond these is the spiritual body, the causal sheath, the seed of divine identity. It holds the blueprint of your soul's journey and connects you to the eternal source beyond incarnation. Manly P. Hall described initiation as a progressive activation of these bodies. One does not leave the physical behind. Instead, each higher body is awakened, purified, and integrated into the total being. This is the inner ascent through the chambers of the temple. Each chamber represents a lesson, a vibration, a passage. And the initiate must pass through each, not by force, but by alignment. The first chamber is the physical body, which must become a vessel of balance. Through breath, posture, movement, and care, the initiate purifies their temple. The physical is not rejected, it is anointed, made sacred through presence and discipline. The second chamber is the emotional astral layer, where the initiate must refine their feelings, cleanse reactive tendencies, and bring stillness to the waters of the inner world. Here, the initiate learns that emotional chaos distorts perception, while emotional harmony becomes a ladder to insight. The third chamber is the mental temple, where clarity of thought, conscious intention, and right understanding allow the initiate to become a true magician, a conscious co-creator. Here, old beliefs are discarded like dust from ancient scrolls. New awareness replaces outdated programs. Finally, the innermost sanctum is entered, the sanctuary of spirit. In ancient temple rites, this was the hidden chamber where the divine presence was invoked. Within the self, this corresponds to the awakened connection to the higher self, the pure presence, that transcends all roles and identities. Hall often said that the true mystery rites were never external ceremonies, but inner events. The initiate walked the corridors of their own soul, lit by the torch of wisdom, and passed through the veils of their own illusion. To enter the temple was to enter conscious selfhood. Not as an ego, but as a reflection of the all. So how does one begin this journey? The first step is to recognize that your body is your temple. Not metaphorically, literally. Your spine is the central pillar. Your breath is the sacred wind that moves through the chambers. Your heart is the altar. Your mind is the dome. And your consciousness is the flame that lights the sanctuary. To enter this temple, you do not need permission. You only need to become still. Begin with breath. Conscious breathing harmonizes all bodies. It is the bridge between the physical and the subtle. A slow, rhythmic breath calms the astral. A deep, rooted breath centers the mental. As you breathe, feel yourself move inward, not upward, not outward, but inward, toward the axis of your being. Next, practice energy circulation. This can be as simple as visualizing light rising through your spine and descending down the front of your body in a loop. Ancient Hermetic and Taoist teachings alike describe this microcosmic orbit as a way of activating the inner circuit, the flow of life force through the temple's pathways. With continued practice, you may begin to perceive your inner architecture. You may feel currents of warmth or subtle vibration. You may see symbols or light in the mind's eye. These are signs that the temple is stirring, that the chambers are responding. Do not chase them. Observe them. As Hall emphasized, visualization is not wishful thinking. It is spiritual architecture. When you visualize with sincerity and clarity, you are constructing inner forms that shape energy. Visualizing your temple, your spine as a pillar of light, your heart as a flame, your crown as a radiant dome, reinforces these archetypes in the subtle body. It trains the mind and body to hold sacred form. In time, the temple within becomes more real than the outer world. It becomes a sanctuary you carry with you, a place of refuge, of strength, of insight. And more than that, it becomes a radiating center. What is refined inwardly begins to affect the outer world. Your speech changes. Your walk changes. Your gaze carries depth. Not because you strive to appear spiritual, but because you have become aligned. This is why, in every age, true initiates have been recognized, not by robes or titles, but by the aura of presence they carry. Their temple is lit. Their energy flows harmoniously. They are centered not in ego, but in the axis of the sacred. And those around them feel it, often without knowing why. You, too, are building this temple. With each breath, each choice, each act of reverence toward your own being. The outer temples will one day fall. The statues will erode. The scrolls will crumble. But the inner temple endures, because it is built in consciousness. It is your true sanctuary, and it is also your true offering. This is the sixth gate on the path of awakening. Let us enter it with reverence, with breath, and with the willingness to make our own being a vessel of the sacred. Chapter 7. The Flame of Illumination and the Solar Mysteries. The flame that burns, at the center of the soul, is the light of divine consciousness. According to Manly P. Hall and the ancient Hermetic masters, each human soul is born from a greater flame. A solar source that shines not with fire, but with divine awareness. This flame is not symbolic alone. It is real, and it resides at the very core of your being. It is the light that has never been extinguished, even in your darkest moments. The teachings of the solar mysteries, preserved in both Hermetic and Egyptian traditions, revolve around this central fire, the source of clarity, immortality, and spiritual kingship. The sun, in this context, is more than a celestial body. It is the visible emblem of the invisible light that animates all life. Just as the sun in the sky nourishes the body, the inner sun nourishes the soul. In Egyptian initiation, the solar current was revered as the path of Ra, the divine journey of the soul through darkness and into illumination. The rising sun represented not only the beginning of the day, but the rebirth of consciousness, the triumph of light over inertia, awareness over forgetfulness. Manly P. Hall often wrote that the true initiate becomes a living sun, a radiant being who emits light by nature, not by effort. Such a person does not speak of truth, they embody it. Their very presence warms, awakens, and reveals. But to reach this state, the initiate must undergo a process of inner ignition, the awakening of the flame within. This flame is not created, it is remembered. It has always been there, waiting beneath layers of thought, emotion, and density. Your task is not to invent the light, but to clear the veil that obscures it. To awaken the solar flame is to illuminate your own center. This is done not through strain, but through quiet alignment. Contemplation, meditation, invocation, and focused devotion become the tools that cleanse the inner altar and allow the flame to rise. Contemplation is the art of holding your awareness steady on a single truth, a divine idea, a symbol, a virtue, until it begins to radiate from within you. As Hall taught, true contemplation is not analysis. It is immersion. You do not dissect the sun to feel its warmth. You face it, receive it, and let it transform you. One of the simplest yet most potent solar practices is sun meditation. This involves sitting with the physical sun, preferably at dawn or dusk, and allowing its rays to touch your skin, your eyes, your heart. You breathe it in, not just as light, but as intelligence. You imagine the rays awakening your inner flame, connecting your body temple to the great temple of the cosmos. In Hermetic philosophy, the sun is associated with the heart center, the seat of will, clarity, and divine guidance. It is also linked to the gold of alchemy, the pure essence of the self, after all impurities have been burned away. To meditate on the sun is to call forth this gold, to polish the inner mirror, so that it may reflect divine light without distortion. Invocation is another sacred solar tool. The act of calling inwardly on higher forces, not from desperation, but from alignment, creates resonance. When you speak a sacred name, hold a divine image, or intone a mantra with clear intention, you awaken the solar vibration within your own subtle bodies. You are not summoning something external. You are inviting what is highest in you to step forward. But this path is not without challenge. The fire that illumines also burns. The solar flame, once awakened, begins to purify. All that is false, reactive, or misaligned will be brought into the light. Hall warned that many seekers fear this stage and retreat, confusing discomfort with danger. But the discomfort is not punishment. It is purification. The inner sun reveals what must be integrated, not to shame you, but to set you free. The initiate must be willing to stand in their own light, to see clearly what they are, to claim what they have forgotten, to endure the alchemical heat that transforms the base into brilliance. This is the work of illumination. It is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming transparent, so that the light within may shine through every layer of being. As you walk this path, you may begin to sense the solar current in your daily life. You feel drawn to truth. You notice when something resonates cleanly and when something feels off. You begin to speak from a deeper place. Your energy becomes steadier, warmer, more focused. You are no longer scattered like moonlight. You are centered like the sun. And this is no small shift. The more this flame is nourished, the more the initiate becomes a source of spiritual gravity. Others feel it, even if they cannot explain it. You become a point of radiance, not because you impose, but because you simply are. The ego no longer needs to shine, because the soul has taken its rightful seat. Hall described the solar initiate as a silent king, whose power does not come from force, but from inner order. Such a person carries the pattern of the universe within them, and because of this, they bring harmony to the outer world simply by being present in it. This is the true gift of the solar mysteries. Not light as display, but light as presence. The flame awakened in one person becomes a light in the world. It spreads not by preaching, but by resonance. The illuminated soul becomes a silent sun, steady, warm, sovereign. And yet, this state is not final. The solar path is a rhythm, illumination, purification, expansion. Again and again. As the physical sun rises and sets, so too does the inner sun move in cycles. The initiate learns to trust these cycles, to honor the periods of radiance and rest alike. For both are sacred. And still, through each turn of the spiral, the light grows clearer, stronger, simpler. Until there comes a time when the initiate no longer seeks light from the outside. They realize the light has always been within them, waiting for recognition. You, too, carry this flame. Even now, as you listen, it stirs. It may be a warmth in the chest, a silence in the breath, a memory without words. This is the true sun. This is the source of your power, not over others, but over illusion. The power to see clearly, to live fully, to give without depletion, to love without need. This is the seventh gate on the path of awakening. Let us walk through it with our heads lifted, our hearts open, and the flame of the eternal sun rising from within. Chapter 8. Silence, Spirit, and the Plane of Pure Being. In the great silence, the voice of the divine speaks. Manly P. Hall often reminded his students that beyond all doctrines, beyond rituals and revelations, there exists a stillness so vast, so luminous, that it can only be described through negation. It is not thought. It is not image. It is not sound. And yet from it, all things are born. This silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of Source. It is the spiritual plane, the highest of the great triad, physical, mental, and spiritual. And unlike the realms below, the spiritual plane does not express itself in shape or motion, but in being. Pure, radiant being. It is the eternal now, that which was before form, and that into which form dissolves. The path through the planes has led us from density to subtlety, from matter to mind, from symbol to energy. And now, we arrive at the threshold of the formless, the dimension where the soul remembers itself not as a traveler, not as an identity, but as awareness itself. Here, there is no direction. There is no goal. There is only the quiet knowing that you are. Hall referred to this as the silence behind the world. He said that while all teachings point toward it, none can fully describe it. Every spiritual tradition, Hermetic, Vedantic, Sufi, Gnostic, speaks of this final plane in veiled terms, the Absolute, the Light, the One, the Unborn. And yet, all of these names fall short, for this realm is beyond name. It is not an experience to be had. It is the field in which all experience arises. And though the mind cannot reach it, the soul can rest in it, not through striving, but through surrender. To reach the spiritual plane is not to conquer it. It is to become transparent enough that it reveals itself. It is the culmination of the great work, but also its vanishing. For the closer you come to this plane, the more effort falls away. The more identity dissolves. The more silence becomes not an absence, but a homecoming. This is the plane of the real, untouched by the rise and fall of form. It is what remains when all thought is burned away. When even the witness is still. At first, this may feel disorienting. 0.5s pause, the seeker, so used to striving, asks, "What do I do here?" But the answer is subtle. You do not act, you allow. You do not create, you receive. You do not define, you rest in the undefined. In Hall's teachings, this was the moment where the initiate no longer needed symbols, because they had become what the symbols pointed to. The body itself is sacred. No more prayers, the breath is communion. No more path, the still point is already arrival. And yet, to reach this still point, the previous stages must be honored. The body must be purified. The emotions clarified. The mind harmonized. The inner temple built, lit, and made quiet. Only then does the doorway open, a doorway made not of stone, but of silence. To enter this space, the initiate practices meditative silence. Not the suppression of thought, but the returning of attention to its source. Not emptiness as absence, but emptiness as fullness, like the sky that holds every cloud, yet remains untouched. This is where being becomes awareness, where breath becomes holy, where every sensation softens, and the observer and the observed begin to dissolve into one field of knowing. And it is here that the soul begins its return. Not to a place, but to a condition, the condition of undivided presence. The soul no longer defines itself by story, struggle, or memory. It remembers what it has always been, a spark of the all, a ripple in the infinite, not separate, but momentarily distinct. Hall described this reunion as a kind of melting, a surrender of individuality not into nothingness, but into everythingness. The drop returns to the ocean, and yet nothing is lost. In fact, something new is born, not egoic selfhood, but essential identity, presence without center, awareness without boundary. This is the mystic death, spoken of in all true initiation. The end of the constructed self. The end of resistance. The end of separation. And beyond this end, there is only light, stillness, peace, and a kind of joy that does not come and go, because it does not depend on conditions. You do not reach this state by climbing. You reach it by softening, by listening, by allowing the surface to quiet until the depths are revealed. And yet, even here, the journey is not over. The purpose of reaching the spiritual plane is not to stay in it forever, removed from the world. Hall was clear: the initiate returns, not in attachment, but in service. Having touched the real, they bring that clarity back into form, into speech, into presence, into action. They become a channel, a bridge between the eternal and the temporal. This is how the awakened soul lives in the world. Not as an authority, not as a performer, but as a quiet flame. Their very being transmits silence, even in the midst of sound. They become transparent to the source. And through them, others begin to remember. In your own life, this plane may appear not as a grand event, but as a subtle shift. A moment of peace for no reason. A stillness between thoughts. A sense that everything is okay, even if nothing has changed. This is not delusion. It is contact. 0.5s pause. The spiritual plane is not somewhere else. It is always here, hidden behind layers of activity and perception. To touch it, sit in silence. Not to get somewhere, but to stop going. Let the breath come and go. Let the thoughts rise and fall. And listen. Not with your ears, but with your whole being. Listen for the silence beneath all sound, the hum beneath the world. That silence is the presence of the All. And it is calling you back, not to abandon life, but to bring spirit into life. To walk as one who has seen the source. To live as a radiant stillness among motion. You do not have to reach enlightenment to feel this. A single moment of genuine stillness can change the course of your life. Not because it adds something, but because it removes what is false. And in what remains there is truth. There is light. There is peace. You have always been this, even when you forgot. And so, the eighth gate opens not through effort, but through presence. Let us pass through it not by walking, but by resting in the stillness we already are. Closing. The Philosopher's Stone, and the Return to the One. The Philosopher's Stone is not a thing, but a state of being, a perfected soul. In the alchemical tradition, the Philosopher's Stone was long sought as the key to transmuting base metals into gold, and even more importantly, to unlocking immortality. But to those with eyes to see, the texts were never about outer chemistry. They were about inner alchemy, the great transmutation of the self. Manly P. Hall often taught that the true stone is not a physical object, but a condition of consciousness. It is the final result of the great work, the fully awakened human being, unified in body, mind, soul, and spirit. Not divided by duality. Not swayed by illusion. But whole, illuminated, and aligned with the divine pattern of the All. This is the culmination of the journey we have traveled. From the dense plane of matter, through the refining fires of the mental and astral realms, into the silence of spirit, and now returning to the world as a conscious bearer of light. The initiate who discovers the stone does not flee the world, they return to it, transformed. Having passed through the 7 gates, they become the 8th, the axis, the stabilizing force, the still point around which worlds turn. Their presence is a harmony. Their will is aligned. Their life becomes a living invocation. This is what it means to become a conscious co-creator. Not to manipulate reality, but to mirror it from a higher octave. To bring forth new forms, new words, new energies, not from ego, but from alignment with the source. The co-creator does not impose. They attune. They shape the world the same way the divine shapes stars, through vibration, intention, and order. The perfected initiate is not perfect in the way the world imagines, flawless, untouchable. Rather, they are transparent to spirit. They have purified the base metal of personality, the heaviness of false self, and in its place, a subtle radiance emerges. A lightness. A clarity. They walk not above the world, but within it, as an embodiment of the real. Hall often spoke of immortality not as endless time, but as the soul's return to its original frequency. The philosopher's stone is the realization that consciousness was never born and never dies. Only the forms it inhabits rise and fall. To discover this is to move without fear, to act without attachment, to live in the present moment fully, not as a theory, but as truth. This awareness does not remove you from life. It deepens your relationship to it. Each act becomes sacred. Each word carries weight. Each breath is a quiet affirmation of your unity with the divine. And so the cycle completes. The journey through the planes does not end in isolation. It ends in integration. The initiate becomes the bridge, between the higher and the lower, the visible and the invisible. Between what is and what can be. This is the essence of the great work, not to escape life, but to illuminate it from within. Not to seek paradise elsewhere, but to recognize the divine in all things, especially the most ordinary. And this is not a path reserved for mystics in caves or initiates in temples. It is open to all who are willing to begin, right where they are. The philosopher's stone does not appear in distant lands. It reveals itself in your breath, your body, your mind, your moments, if only you are willing to see with new eyes. To reach this state is not to become more, but to become less encumbered, less burdened by illusion, less ruled by fear. The initiate sheds layer after layer, until only what is real remains. And what remains is simple, radiant, and free. And so, we close this journey not with an ending, but with a return. Not to what you were, but to what you have always been. You are the temple. You are the flame. You are the breath of the all, moving through form, awakening to itself. In the words of Manly P. Hall, when the soul learns to stand upright in its own light, it no longer depends upon borrowed radiance. You are ready to stand in that light. To those who walk this path, to those who seek not escape but embodiment, to those who remember the truth beneath forgetting, this work is yours. This light is yours. This silence is yours. And through your awakening, others awaken. Through your alignment, the pattern restores itself. You are not alone in this work. You never were. All true initiates are connected, not through dogma or doctrine, but through vibration. Through clarity. Through love. So let the work continue. Let the stone be revealed, again and again, in your words, your walk, your silence. Let the great work live through you, not once, but as a rhythm. As a sacred heartbeat that echoes across the plains, from the one, to the many, and back again. This is the 9th gate on the path of awakening. And beyond it, only presence remains. Let us close now in silence, and in remembrance. And if you found this journey meaningful, if it stirred something in you, if it helped you glimpse a deeper part of yourself, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, not for numbers, not for validation, but to help increase the consciousness of this planet by getting this message to reach more people. Every interaction expands the light. Every share echoes the ancient current. And every awakened soul becomes a beacon for those still seeking. Thank you for walking this path. Let the flame continue.